She called 911 with the kind of calm that made everyone trust her instantly. Her timeline was perfect. Her answers were flawless, and that's exactly why no one questioned her story. Until it was too late. This is the case that proves sometimes the most dangerous thing in an investigation isn't to lie. It's a story that feels too right to question. Claire Whitman was the kind of person you'd trust with your life. Early 30s, articulate, composed, the type of woman who never demanded attention and never seemed to need it. She lived in one of those quiet coastal towns where everyone knows everyone, where reputations spread faster than facts and where hers had been spotless for years. She worked at a small design firm, volunteered every weekend. Friends described her as warm but reserved, someone who kept to herself but was always there when you needed her. So when tragedy walked into her life, no one saw it coming. One evening, Claire's partner didn't come home. The call she made to police was textbook perfect. No panic, no hysteria, just measured concern. She laid out her timeline with surgical precision, where she'd been that day, the last time she saw him, what he was wearing, every word of their last conversation. When investigators arrived at her home, everything checked out. No signs of struggle, no raised voices reported by neighbors. Nothing suspicious at all. Claire did everything right. She handed over her phone, her messages, her location history, anything that might help find him. And here's the thing, she never hesitated, not once. Her friends said she was devastated, but in a private way. She cried when she talked about him, but never excessively. She answered every question without contradicting herself. She never demanded sympathy or made the story about her grief. And because of that restraint, because of that composure, everyone believed her completely. Investigators built their entire case around Claire's account. Not because they were careless or lazy, but because there was no friction, no red flags, no reason to doubt. Her timeline matched the digital records. Her emotional responses seemed genuine. Her demeanor screamed sincerity, not deception. And in missing persons cases, belief isn't built on evidence. It's built on coherence. Does the story hold together? Does it feel right? Does the person telling it seem trustworthy? For Claire, the answer to all three was yes. Days turned into weeks. The search expanded outward. Possible sightings, unknown vehicles, vague tips from people who thought they saw someone matching his description at a gas station or near the highway. Claire showed up to every search. She stood quietly at press conferences. She answered the same questions over and over with the same careful precision. To the public, she became the face of loss, the grieving partner left behind, and no one suspected she could be hiding something. But here's what almost no one knew. Buried deep in the early police reports, in a line that was noted and then forgotten, there was one small detail that didn't quite fit. It was minor, easy to overlook, simple to explain away. At the time, investigators wrote it down and moved on. After all, when a story feels complete, details like that don't feel important. No one realized that tiny inconsistency was the moment everything quietly began to fall apart. By the time anyone thought to revisit that detail, it was too late. The case had hardened into something fixed. Claire's story had been repeated so many times to police, to reporters, to the community, that it no longer sounded like an account. It sounded like fact. Every retelling smoothed over the rough edges, reinforced the rhythm, made it easier to accept as the complete truth. The searches narrowed, tips slowed down, possibilities collapsed into probabilities. And quietly, without anyone really deciding it, the assumption took hold. Nothing criminal had happened. He'd left voluntarily. Investigators reviewed the phone records again, not to find contradictions, but to confirm what they already believed. Location data was checked, timestamps compared, messages reread. Everything aligned just enough to support the narrative. Claire remained cooperative throughout. Same timeline, same story, same calm precision. And consistency in cases like this gets mistaken for truth. When someone tells the same story without variation, it feels reliable, even when no one has actually challenged the story itself. So the case shifted. from active investigation to procedural maintenance, from urgency to paperwork. Resources were redirected, leads that didn't fit the narrative were deprioritized. Then came the decision that changed everything. The disappearance was officially classified as voluntary until proven otherwise. That one label, voluntary, meant fewer detectives, fewer questions, fewer reasons to dig deeper. Claire was informed in a quiet meeting. She nodded, thanked them, asked what would happen next. There was something in her voice, relief maybe, or at least something that sounded like relief, and no one thought to ask why. But two investigators couldn't let it go. That original detail, the one that had been quietly dismissed months earlier, kept bothering them. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't blow up Claire's timeline. It simply didn't fit. When they tried to place it back into the story, it created a distortion. Like a note played slightly off-key in an otherwise perfect song. They reviewed it once, then again, and again. Not asking what it meant, but asking why it had been so easy to ignore in the first place. Because once a story is believed, doubt doesn't kick down the door. It creeps in through cracks you didn't know were there. So they did something radical. They stopped using Claire's account as the foundation. They reconstructed that evening working backward, using only independent data points. And that's when everything shifted. A location ping that seemed irrelevant before? It now sat outside the window Claire described. A receipt timestamp? It placed her somewhere earlier than she remembered. A traffic camera that had been previously ignored captured movement that didn't contradict her words, but quietly challenged their certainty. Here's the twist. None of it suggested Claire had lied. She hadn't deceived anyone. She had simply believed what she was saying. But belief, it turns out, is not the same as accuracy. When investigators finally confronted Claire with the revised timeline, she didn't argue. She didn't get defensive. She just stared at the evidence in silence, searching her own memory for something, anything, that would reconcile what she felt was true with what the records now showed. And slowly, painfully, the realization hit everyone in that room. The decision to classify this as voluntary had been made too early, and that decision had shaped everything that followed. Search areas had been reduced during the critical first 48 hours. Witnesses who might have come forward had moved on. Surveillance footage had been overwritten. By the time the case was reopened, the trail wasn't just cold, it was gone. Claire became a different kind of figure overnight. Not a suspect, not a villain, but a reminder of how easily certainty can form around the wrong version of events. The public never got a clean resolution. Just updates that arrived years too late, explaining what might have happened rather than what did. And Claire was left with a truth that solved nothing, one that offered clarity without comfort. Claire Whitman was believed because she was believable, trusted because she was composed, centered because her story felt right. But the damage had already been done by the time anyone asked the question they should have asked at the beginning. Not whether she was lying, but whether her story had been tested enough to deserve belief. This case didn't fail because of deception. It failed because certainty arrived too early. And once that happens, it doesn't just shape the investigation. It shapes what can never be recovered. When investigators choose comfort over questions, when coherence is mistaken for truth, when one person's believability becomes everyone's blind spot, that's when one decision changes everything. What do you think? Should investigators have caught that detail sooner? Let me know in the comments.